So Greg Pruitt is with Second Amendment Alliance, and of course he totally kicks it at the Capitol. And the reason why we went to him to find out, how do we do this? What are we doing wrong? What do we need to be doing differently? Is because Greg is successful at the Capitol. So that's why I asked him here to talk a little bit about holding your legislators accountable, and that way you all can do the same thing. Thanks for joining us, Greg.
I appreciate you guys coming out and taking the time to learn. Here is the problem with our electorate and the people in Idaho. Right now, everybody is all politicked out, right? Everybody's sick and tired of politics. The election is sort of over. It's over for everybody except for two people. And so everybody is now going to sleep on politics, right? Except for you guys and a select few other people. Nobody else cares anymore. They're done. They are done for the next 2 years. And so this is our problem, because at the end of the day, we are going to get to the Capitol, and all these new legislators are going to get to the Capitol, and all the other legislators that won their reelection, or in the case of Christy Zitto, is going to the Senate, okay? So now we all forget about them, because they told us on the campaign trail, guess what? I'm the most conservative legislator out there. I'm pro Second Amendment. I'm pro babies. Every single one of them told you that on the campaign trail. And then when they get into the Capitol, they realize that there are lobbyists, very wealthy lobbyists. Okay, I'm not one of them. There are very wealthy lobbyists and law firms, and there's a lot of temptation from leadership for power, okay, to get on committees. You want to be the committee chairman. You want to be all of this stuff, right? You got elected. You worked your butt off, and no matter who it is, most of them work their butts off if they had a race. Okay, it's a lot of work. And so when they get into the Capitol and you guys are no longer holding them accountable, you're no longer paying attention to what they're doing, it's very easy for them to go, well, shoot, nobody's paying attention to what I'm doing, so I'll just kind of vote down the middle, or I'll vote against my principles because leadership likes this other bill, right? This bill goes against everything I believe in, but leadership likes it, and I kind of want a committee chairmanship someday, so I'm going to go ahead and vote for it. In the meantime, you have no idea what's happening. Okay, because you are so tired of politics. I'm tired of politics. Okay, so that's just human nature, right? We get tired of this crap. And then they go to the Capitol, and all of those temptations for money and power, all of that comes in. In the meantime, all of their constituents aren't paying attention. This is a major problem. And luckily in Idaho, for instance, we have a Second Amendment group, okay? So anything gun related, everyone in the state knows about it fairly quick. Everyone in that Capitol building knows if they go down the wrong side of that, there's going to be consequences. Okay, if it's a health issue, Health Freedom Idaho is there to help push that. There are some other major issues that the Idaho Freedom Foundation helps educate people on. So we do have a good chunk of people here in Idaho that are paying attention and that are working hard. But you can't hold your legislators accountable if you don't know what they're doing. Okay, in 2 years, when they're all running for re-election under new district lines, they're going to go out on the campaign trail, and this is when most of the electorate gets involved again, and they say, hey, how did you do the last 2 years? Well, damn it, I was the most conservative legislator in the Capitol. Okay, right? That's what they're all going to tell you come campaign time. No legislator is going to go on the campaign trail and be like, I voted like a Democrat most of the time. That's not a thing, right? They're never going to tell you that. You have to figure that out, and then you have to hold them accountable for what they're doing. So Heather's right, and I don't know if did Christy already go? Did you already go, Christy? Not yet? Okay. So, but they'll both tell you, right, that every legislator is going to go on the campaign trail and tell you all of that. And it's just not true, because if you look at the Idaho Freedom Foundation index scores, somebody's lying. Okay. One of my previous legislators, Jerem Wagner, very nice guy, used to be my sister's bishop, okay, better Mormon than I'll ever be. He voted like a Democrat most of the time. His ratings was in the 50s for the IFF. When I got his campaign material, it said he was conservative. It said he was pro-gun and limited government and all that stuff. Okay, so all of that campaign stuff has to go out the door, and we have to figure out, how do we hold these guys accountable? At the end of the day, they are making a promise. Okay, they make that promise to you on the campaign trail. how do we get from point A of that promise to point B, the re-election, and make sure they don't get derailed the entire time? And so Heather, I did hear Heather talking a little bit about reaching out to your legislators, talking to your legislators, trying to work with them. That is always plan A. Okay, plan A is you try to get them to do the right thing. You try to work with them to do the right thing. If you don't live in a district with a Christy Zitto or a Heather Scott or a Priscilla Giddings or a Ron Nate or a Chad Christensen or whoever, if you don't live in one of those districts, you got some work to do. And the problem is right now, legislators, most elected officials, not just at the Capitol, but across the state, they care about one thing and one thing only, and that's re-election. Okay. Normally I would ask you, but you're all muted. So, okay. They care about re-election. And that's human nature, right? You work your butt off, you win, you go do stuff at the Capitol, and you want to go back and do it again. So they try to do things that don't make their electorate upset. But if we're not paying attention, then they don't care, right? If you're not going to pay attention to all these votes that they're making to increase your taxes or to dump hundreds of millions of dollars into this failing education system, if you haven't reached out to them and told them, hey, you need to do this. Now, Heather is right in that you can build this relationship with them and try to get them to do the right thing. At the end of the day, you have to remember, though, on their minds is not necessarily, your constitutional argument about why this bill is good or why this bill is bad. Their mind is, am I going to lose re-election if I go against whatever Monica is telling me or whatever David is telling me? Am I going to lose my re-election because of that? And if they think that they're not going to, most of them are going to vote for it anyway. Okay. If they don't fear losing their jobs from you or from a group, not a group necessarily like the ISA, but a group of citizens within your community, within your district, they are not likely to change what they are doing. Okay. So there are some of these legislators that I think are good and have gone off the rails. And maybe that's because, like Heather said, nobody's reaching out to them, right? Nobody outside of a couple people or the lobbyists who have all the money are reaching out to them. And so that goes, again, to the electorate not paying attention and not doing their jobs and reaching out to these folks. Now, you have to understand, when you reach out to your legislators, again, present company excluded, outside of these Liberty folks, you are going to get a litany of excuses like Misty was talking about. It's just not the right time. The governor will never go for it. No, the Senate's a terrible chamber. The Senate's going to kill all the bills. You're the only ones talking about it. I have heard every single one of them for the last 8.5 years. Okay. Every single excuse you could possibly think of, I have heard it. Okay. We passed gun bills and this is an 80% in both chambers. The Republicans control 80%. So there is no reason that a gun bill should not pass other than these Republicans are not who they say they are, right? And that goes back to accountability. We're not holding them accountable at election time. We're not holding them accountable while they're at the Capitol. We're not holding them accountable at the party meetings, okay, your district meetings or your central committee meetings or whatever. There's not a lot of accountability. In fact, I don't remember exactly what it was, but at the Republican state convention, a proposal to make sure that Republicans in the Capitol followed the party platform was voted down. I don't know how close that was, but that got voted down. Like, the Republican Party does not want to hold itself accountable. And there's a reason for that, and that's because the Democrats are running as Republicans in our state. They're voting in our primary. And so, in my opinion, there's a lot of work to do. And when it comes to accountability, this is extremely difficult because, understand this. Okay, with ISAA, we took one of two of the most important issues to most Idahoans, right? Guns and babies. Those are the two most important issues. And I run a group that deals with one of those issues. And so when anything anti-gun comes up, every single person in that Capitol, including the Democrats, are already thinking, oh my gosh, what does Greg and all his psycho right-wing nut job people think about this bill, right? And if they think we're going to oppose it, which we almost always do if it's crap, okay, let me rephrase that, we always do when it's crap, they know right away, don't even bother. Like, the Democrats don't even bother submitting gun control bills here. That's not normal, okay? In most states, the Democrats at least try something. They don't even try it here, okay? they know that we are standing thousands and thousands of people behind Christy Zitto, behind Heather Scott, and that if they do something, we're going to go to the polls and we're going to throw them out. Okay, the gun owners are going to throw them out. We've done it to Tom Lurcher and Julie Van Orden and Paul Romrell, and we've done it to opponents of these guys. And so we hold them accountable. We have created what? We have created fear within them that the gun owners are going to throw them out of office, and they don't want to get thrown out of office. Lurcher in particular was a huge victory for gun owners because he was a 32-year incumbent and chairman of the State Affairs Committee, which is arguably the most powerful committee in the House, okay? And so a 32-year incumbent and the state committee chair, and he got tossed out by gun owners. And so that sent a very powerful message that, hey, you know, you may not like me, you may not like my style of politics, but at the end of the day, if you don't help gun owners, we're going to make you pay for it come election time. Okay, so now we have to figure out how to replicate that fear. I'm just talking about political fear, okay, into all of these other issues. And it doesn't take a group as big as the ISAA or as big as HFI to do that accountability. It doesn't take that big of a group. I promise you, if you and 30 other people in your district are constantly, every single day, watching these legislators, if you're calling your legislator and saying, don't you dare vote like this, right? Don't you dare go against what Heather Scott did. If you're constantly doing that, they're going to understand, oh, crap, you know, if I don't do what these 30 people are telling me, which represents a larger portion of my district, then I may get thrown out next time. And none of them want that. So, I mean, that's, for me, that's kind of it in a nutshell, guys. I mean, that's the very short and condensed version of what I would normally teach in a class. But it's paying attention. Yes, first reach out. Try and do everything you can to get them to do the right thing by building a relationship with them. But I just, in the back of your mind, just understand that you can build that relationship, and sometimes, like Misty said, they'll lead you down a rabbit hole on purpose. That happened to me the first 2 years I went to the Capitol. They were just leading me down a damn rabbit hole. Heather remembers this too. So actually 3 years, they ran us down a rabbit hole. It's like, oh, we'll go do this. Well, now go do this. And yeah, go ahead and try this and try this and try that. If they start getting down that road, you'd have to call them out on it and say, hey, look, this, I know how the process works. Greg told me how the process works. See how that gets you. Okay. And, you know, I know you're just trying to lead me down the route. All I want is a hearing. Let's just have a hearing. Let's have a public hearing on this issue and hold them to that. And if they still lead you down a rabbit hole, say, look, I'm not happy with what you're doing. And if you keep doing this, I'm going to get some other constituents involved and we're going to have some problems. And then that's when all the excuses and everything are about to come out. Don't give up, hold them accountable, and don't let them off the hook. Do you have any questions?
Hey, Greg, you've got a couple more minutes. Can you talk about a lit drop and when and how to do that?
Yes, lit drops, my favorite. So with Tom Lurcher, he was one of the first ones we ever did this to. Actually, no, it wasn't Tom. It was during an election. We did a lit drop on, I can't remember his name. He was a city council member in Emmett. And basically, he had gone out and opposed a pro-Second Amendment ordinance that we had put up in Emmett, which was actually, all it did was bring Emmett in alignment with state law. And so this guy was like, I'm not going to do it. I don't care. You know, I'm going to vote against this. He hated guns. I went and testified at this hearing, and he was literally sweating, and he wouldn't look me in the eye as I was up there talking to legislators and stuff, or excuse me, the city council members. And he wouldn't look me in the eye because this guy was so terrified of guns. It was hilarious. And so I think I actually, in that meeting, I think I said, Frey, Stephen Frey, I think was his name. I said, look, man, I don't know what you're sweating for. I'm an Iraq veteran. I'll take a bullet for you to defend your life, you know. And then he didn't really think that was funny as I did. But so what we do is we get a piece of paper. In this case, we actually splurged and got some cards. But usually we just get one piece of paper, pink or yellow or green or, you know, something bright that people can see. And we'll put the legislator or whoever, city council member's name on there, and just a quick blurb about this is what they are doing, this is what they did, here's a bill they voted against. And then what we'll do is we'll go down to their city or district. And in Tom Lurcher's case, we went to like 6 cities, and we shot videos in every city with these pieces of paper and said, hey, we're here today in Soda Springs, we're here today in Malad, or Preston, I think it was Preston, and a few others. And then that information has their phone number on there to the state capitol, okay, or to the city hall or whatever you want to put on there. And then all you're doing is creating this opportunity for them to understand how serious you are. Because I promise you, and I know because they always complain when I do this, but when you go down to their district and you pass out 5,000 flyers with their name on it and their number saying they're blocking a pro-gun bill or whatever it is, and then you distribute that all over their towns and their district, they're not happy, right? But they also know that 5,000 people now understand within their district that they were not doing what they promised to do on the campaign trail, okay? And now a lit drop is kind of our last ditch effort, like, hey man, we're giving you the chance to do the right thing. You're not doing the right thing. Now we're going to make you pay for it. In the case of the Emmett City Council member, I don't remember how many, there's like 3,000 houses in Emmett, and we gave everybody in Emmett this flyer. We were walking around in the snow for like days and passing these flyers out. And election time came, and the guy hadn't been challenged, and out of 6 candidates, he took dead last. And he got tossed out of office. So. But we've done that to Lurcher. We've done that to a number of legislators. And it's kind of our last ditch effort of, hey, we're going to go pass these out. And so usually what we'll do is we'll go to a like especially in a bigger town, we'll go to a grocery store and just stuff them in windshield wipers or in door handles, and you just plop, 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 plop. You don't care if they're Republican, you don't care if they're Democrat, but when they see on video that you're out passing out those flyers, they immediately understand, oh crap. You know, they're not buying my excuses, they're not buying any of the stuff that I'm trying to feed them. They're going out there to do this. And so usually we do 1 page only on the front and just a quick paragraph, a picture of who it is, their phone number and email, and saying contact them and tell them to stop doing whatever they're doing. Now, if we have enough time, we will go find wherever they live and just distribute it in their entire neighborhood. We'll find some of their top donors, and if it's in their district, and we'll distribute it in their neighborhoods. We'll find their any relatives they have in their neighborhoods, and we just let everybody know exactly what is happening. And the beauty of it is we did this to a guy named Brandon Hickson. He passed away, but we did this to him, and he immediately went to the Capitol the next day and started complaining to all the other legislators. Greg, did you see what Greg did to me? He shot a video, and now they passed out flyers all over the district. Well, what do you think Brandon Hickson just did for me? For free. Okay, he bought free fear for us. Okay, now all of these other legislators, and I had heard that a lot of them were like, dude, you're on your own, man. You fight your own fight with Greg. We're not getting involved in that. And now all of them know, crap, if I do the same thing to Greg, he's going to get the gun owners involved, and they're going to go down to my district and do the exact same thing, right? So anyway, that's how I build relationships. I build relationships with Heather and all the good people, right?
Of course. Like, yes, and like Christy Zitto.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Greg. Okay, Christy Zitto is one of the most accessible legislators, and that's what I love about her. That's why I thought it would be really good for her to talk about the best way for people to approach their legislator. How do we email Christy? Should the email look like? Should we go into long details? And what do you think about holding legislators accountable? How do you like to see that happen? What do you think works? What is effective?
Well, I think what is effective is different for every legislator, but I know for me, and this has got to be pretty close across the board, I'm just a person just like everyone else. So talk to me just like you would anybody else. Talk to me like you would if you were going to go over across the street and talk to your neighbor about their dog that barks all night long or something like that. Now, granted, if the dog's barking all night long and you haven't slept, you might be not in the best mood when you get there. But be that as it may, your legislators deserve your respect. And something that I really respect when someone comes to me to talk to me about an issue, and I get calls from all over, you know, every district except like Heather's district and Ron's district and stuff like that. Those people know they have a legislator that's accessible, so they don't. But I get calls from people all over. But if you have a problem, and I did this when I was on the school board also, because people would come to you and they'd say, well, this needs to be fixed and that needs to be changed and this just isn't right. And I would say, you know, that's great, I can see what you're saying, but bring me the solution to the problem when you bring the problem. Don't just come to me and drop it in my lap and then go off on about your merry way and think that it's my job to fix it all and make it better. Because there's, I don't know how many million plus citizens in the state of Idaho, and I represent my district. I represent the people in my district, and I'll work for people outside of my district. But you have to come to me with the solution to the problem. You can't just come and say, this is what's wrong, fix it. Because we're not working together that way. And I think that's really important, because a good legislator, I think, is busy all the time. A good legislator tries to take phone calls from people that call them and contact them about what's important to them. Now, another thing that I've noticed since I've been in the legislature is sometimes people will call with a problem, and they'll call, you think they're going to complain, and they'll vent, and they might swear and scream and holler and everything. But sometimes people just want to know that someone's listening. They want to know that someone really cares enough to just answer the phone. And it's okay to do that too. And when you have a legislator or representative that will do that, appreciate them for that. And once in a while, let them know that you care. I think that's important as well. Another thing that I'd like to point out is just because you have access to a representative, a legislator, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have influence over them. And I find that people have more influence. Everybody can have a level of access, but you will always have more influence if you've researched what it is you want to talk about, if you go and you stay on point, if you take something written or send an email in advance so that they have a chance to read it and review it and know what it is you want to talk about when you get there, or correspond in email that same way. But it's really important to stay on point, and it's really important to remember, especially during the session, that, you know, we are busy on the run from committee meetings to session, except all day long probably, except for that maybe hour that we have for lunch. At least this has been my experience. And then sometimes I won't leave the Capitol until really, really late at night, because I don't usually go to a lot of the dinners and receptions and stuff that there are, because I don't work for the lobbyists, I work for you. And lobbyists can sometimes have some really good information, and you can learn a lot from them. But it's important to always learn both sides, because they are getting paid to influence you. They are getting paid to present to you the side of the argument of the person who's writing their check. And that's important to remember. So when you hear something that's coming up, you have to follow what happens in the legislature so that you know this. Then if you don't agree with it, it's important to get good, valid, real information to your representative so that they have both sides of the argument, so that they can see both sides of an issue. And I think that's important as well. And be respectful of their time. So what was the other thing you wanted? Oh, why is it important to hold them accountable? Well, when I decided to run for office, there was my daughter, one other gal, and a couple of, just a real close circle. And we made a pact with each other that if I started to get off the path that we had set, and if I started to get away from the goals that we could see, you know, obeying my oath of office, we have a list of things when I look at legislation, you know, just because something's moral or legal doesn't mean it's moral. Who does it help? Who does it hurt? Who's it going to cost? And so every piece of legislation gets laid against those, gets measured against those 7 rules. And we have an agreement that if I start to get off that path, that they're going to bring me back into line. And the reason that's important is because everybody goes there with good intentions. And one of my favorite lobbyists, and I think he might be Heather's favorite lobbyist as well, my first year he came to me and he said, you'll never be better than you are your first year, because that's the year you care the most. But so because he told me that, I worked really hard to make sure that I don't lose that zeal for really representing the people that sent me there. So I focus on that all the time. But it's important to hold people in office accountable, because if you don't, if they don't know you're watching, if they don't know you care, and if that is not witnessed at the ballot box, then they think what they're doing is all right and you're okay with it. But if they vote, let's say we have an abortion bill come up or a gun bill, those are both, those are pretty black and white. You either think abortion's wrong or you don't think it's wrong. Gun law the same way, either the Second Amendment shall not be infringed or you can infringe on it a little bit for the sake of safety. There's not a lot of gray area there. It's pretty black and it's pretty white. If your representative makes a vote that you're not happy with, you need to let them know. And you need to let your neighbors know. And they need to let their neighbors know. I took a campaign class once that they told us that every one person that you talk to will have contact with 7 others on that issue. Or every one person you talk to about a representative, an elected official, they will have contact with 7 other people about that representative. And that might be at the grocery store, it might be at church, it might be a family member, that spreads pretty fast. So it's important that you know what's going on. It's important that you know the votes that they're taking. It's important that you build a relationship so that you can contact them. It's important that you don't take advantage of their time because time is precious and time is short. And don't take what my uncle used to say, don't use 10 hits on the nail when it only takes 2. So just get to the point, tell them what they need to know, what's important to you, and then respect their time. So, I so agree with everything that everybody said here tonight, that we have the government we deserve, and we have been complacent for a long time in the situations that we're seeing this year, like with the COVID and like with what we consider the governor's overreach and stuff. Those pieces of legislation weren't just passed last year. The pieces of legislation that are making happen what we see happen have been in the making for a long time. And little by little by little, we have watched our legislature more or less give up a lot of their power to the executive branch. And I think one of the most egregious places we see that are in the bureaucratic agencies. Our Constitution in Idaho is very specific about how many agencies there should be. And it said if there are more than that, they should be temporary and they should only last for a period of 2 years. We have well over 200 agencies and boards and on and on and on. And every one of those are staffed with people who are appointed by the governor. And every one of them have the full force and effect of law in your life. And I think that's something that when we get through this year, get the governor's power reined in, get the legislature back on a more equal footing, because we're 3 equal branches of government, we really need to look at the bureaucratic agencies, and it will take a lot of citizen involvement. We'll need people who are willing to go through all of those rules and look at them and ask, why is this here? What effect does it have? And what do we need to do to change it? So thank you for asking me to do this tonight. I appreciate it. It's been great.
Christy, can you speak to when people email, so Health Freedom Idaho, for example, we often do here's what to email, here's the issue, here's the issues about the issue, right? And so people can just copy and paste the email and send it to their legislators. How do you receive emails like that? Because of course, people don't know what to say and they'll say, well, what do I say? And so then we'll give an example email, they'll copy and paste it. We always encourage them to start it off with a little bit of their own, input of how it would affect them personally. But when you get emails like that, I've heard legislators say, oh, I just throw it in the trash because it's the same email over and over. I've also heard people say, I put it in a folder so I can sort of see how many I'm getting of those, so I can track how many I'm getting. What do you do with those?
Well, I'm kind of that way with a form email. If you know it's going to just say the same thing over and over and over, you just put it in a folder and kind of keep track of how many you get in favor of an issue and how many you get against an issue. Because it's a waste of time and energy to read the same form email over and over and over. Convention of States people are horrible for that. I mean, even now you'll get 4 or 5 a day. And then if they decide to run that again, you'll get maybe 100 a day. So you're just not going to read them. But an email that comes to me from someone, like I said, that tells me their story, tells me their experience, but it's brief and to the point. Those I read. I really even sometimes like emails when we have a hot topic that we're going to vote on. I get a lot of emails that will say, vote yes, or vote no, or don't support this, or don't support that. And I really appreciate those as well, because I know in both cases, those emails are heartfelt. I know that that person understands that a legislator has a lot on their plate during the session, and that, just letting them know briefly where you stand makes a lot of difference in my mind, because I've been swayed before by keeping a tally of emails that I get from people or phone calls that I get from people. And then I'll look at the issue, and then again, I'll weigh, is it constitutional? Who does it help? Who does it hurt? Does it increase taxes? Those 7 things, I usually keep that hanging on my wall so that I don't forget it. So again, just brief and to the point, share your experience. I always love that, because I've even shared those experiences on the floor before when I've given testimony. I love reading letters and sharing the experiences of the people of our state when they send them, because I think that should be as impactful to other legislators when they're deciding and weighing in their mind how they should vote and how they should not, as anything. I mean, to vote for something because it's going to get you a chairmanship, why are you there? That's pretty sad to think that people will sell their integrity just to say that they're a chairman of a committee, or to say that they have some leadership position. Because I know that's not why I went there. I know that there are others that would agree with that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they don't just sell their integrity, they sell their constituents out.
Yes.
Representative Heather Scott, do you have anything to add to that as far as the emails, receiving emails? Do you like bullet points? How do you sort it out when you receive a copy and paste email? Do you like it in the subject line, vote no or vote yes?
Yeah, the shorter the better. That's huge, just because we do get so much to read. It's always nice to know if they're in my district. I pay more attention, and I think most people do, if they know you're in the district, because quite frankly, the people in Boise probably do not feel the same way about guns as the people in North Idaho feel. And I'm probably going to lean towards I will lean towards North Idaho over how Boise feels about guns. And so that makes a bigger difference. So if you're building up an activist team across the state, it's really a good idea to have the key towns from those districts. And maybe because there's going to be a district change, as you organize them by the town name, and then you say, I'm from Twin Falls, and I want you to vote no. That's helpful. Calls, I think one thing I'll mention about calls is we are only in our offices 3 months out of the year, unless you live down in Boise and go into the office. So I'll get down to Boise and I'll have 130 phone messages from people who are calling me in Boise. To me, they're important, and I'll eventually get through them, but they don't understand the system enough to know I'm not even there. So that's one thing to keep in mind when they're there, when they're not there. So calls are important, but the problem, like Christy, keep them short. Christy said about keeping letters short, keeping calls short. Some days I will take 60 to 70 calls, and I try to keep track of all those calls. I think what's helpful is when you meet your legislator or you talk to them, you introduce yourself, say, hey, I'm Misty. I'm the one that contacted you earlier about vaccinations. Anytime you can kind of remind them who you are, because that's helpful, and where you're from, that's really helpful. And then in person, always building, I truly believe building that relationship. Like Christy said, you can get time, but influence and time are 2 different things. And the influence you can build by getting to know your legislator is huge. And when they trust you, you might not know a bill's coming up, and they may call you because you're the expert on, sewage, I don't know, sewage plants or something. Whatever it is you're the expert on, maybe pharmaceuticals, they're going to call you because in their notes, all they know is you've helped them with this issue before. So I truly think that don't, you do want to put pressure when you need to put pressure. You do want to do lit drops when you really want to draw attention in that, but you definitely, if you've got decent legislators, they may be voting wrong because they're uneducated. And so you have to educate them. And then if they choose to vote wrong, replace them. But you can educate them and move them in the right direction sometimes easier than just getting a new one every 2 years and the district keeps spitting out bad legislators. So, and sometimes it's really hard to get rid of an incumbent. So if you're going to have them, some of these people have been there 15 years, they're probably going to be hard to get rid of unless they vote bad on a gun bill. You might want to try to influence them. So I hope
that's true. I have a story about that. So when we first started talking about the difference between having influence or having time, Senator Hyder, he said, "Oh yes, I'll be glad to carry your bill." This was when we were new and we wanted to bring that rule in line with statute regarding the vaccine form, the parent form to the schools. And so we said, "Oh yes, I'll carry your bill." We're chatting all summer. I have his cell phone number. He's super kind. I think this is all going to work out. And I'm thinking, what better person to have carry our bill than the chairman of the Health and Welfare Committee, which he was at the time. Well, I thought, oh, this is great, Well, we get a print hearing, and his committee voted to hear the bill, and then and we got a bill number, and then he put the bill directly in the drawer. His own bill, directly in the drawer. So this is the kind of shenanigans they can play. Now we had to decide, what are we going to do about that? Well, we did a lit drop, and the fact of the matter is Senator Hyder is never going to vote in our favor regarding health freedom. So we decided that it was worth doing a lit drop in his district and notifying his constituents about what he did. Well, the good thing about that is that he was no longer chairman of the Health and Welfare Committee the next session. So that was effective in one way. It did also inspire someone to run against him, which even though we didn't get him out of his seat, which, that would have been obviously the best thing, it did get him out of the chairman seat and put him on notice that somebody is willing to run against him. And nobody had run against him in quite some time. So it gets that person, that legislator, thinking, I need to start doing the right thing or my position it could go away. So anyway, I think that is when you use it. But like everybody is saying here, and I'll reiterate it, we would never do such a thing to someone who we think we can educate on our point. Fred Martin isn't going to vote in our direction. Hyder's not going to vote in our direction. And those are the people that we've done lit drops on. But we have other legislators who may not always vote on the side of freedom, but would actually be willing to hear what we have to say about, say, the vaccine issue. And we'll take the time, obviously, to do that. So obviously the lit drop is to be used on certain occasions for certain reasons, but it's not the go-to every time. You have to think about it. Can I educate my legislator? And that brings me to the next point, is when I did create relationships with these legislators, like Representative Heather Scott, Representative Ron Nate, Representative Priscilla Giddings. When I created relationships with these legislators, I noticed that they opened and read my emails. And before I had those relationships, I felt like I was sending emails that was just going out into the abyss. But because they knew who I was and they'd see my email and they'd go, oh, Misty, yeah, well, what does she have to say about this bill? And so I think when you create that relationship, they at least care about what you have to say about it because they know that you're their constituent. Doesn't mean that they're going to vote the way you want them to vote, but I think they're more likely to open your email and read it because they know you, they've seen your face, they know that you're involved, and they know that you're in their district. Does that make sense?
Yes, Misty, and if I can just add to something you mentioned, running candidates against elected officials. This is super, super effective to get, sometimes, I guess the big thing about the party system and the committee system is what they're designed to do is protect your legislators so they are not on the record. So if there's a controversial issue, the committee system will protect them by not allowing that bill to come up in committee so they don't have to be on the record on that issue. The one thing you can do to thwart that is to run candidates against these squishy legislators to get them on the record. And sometimes you don't need to run candidates just to win. You just need to run candidates so there are forums and you can show the difference between liberty and non-liberty, or you just need to show the difference in the balance there. And it is huge. And the other thing it does is it helps when there's candidates running against every legislator in the state, the establishment and the lobbyists have to choose where they're going to put their money. And they usually sometimes will leave alone people like Christy or I if they're concentrated on busy and keeping one of their people in office. Otherwise, if there's no challengers across the state, they start throwing money against good liberty folks that are actually voting for your interest. So I can't tell you how critical it is to run candidates against any legislator that is not working for the people. It is critical. And it doesn't have to be the best candidate. It just has to be someone willing to step up, put their name in the hat, and show up at these forums and show a difference in the direction that they could go.
Awesome, thank you for that. And Sarah Clendenin is a shining star example of that because she has ran against Fred Martin twice now, and she just cannot stand for him to run unopposed because it does bring these things to the surface, which I totally appreciate. And Sarah, we have a question for you. This was from your presentation. So do department rules override law or vice versa, just to clarify?
So the way it's supposed to work is that there is a controlling statute and that our rules are written derived from those statutes with the understanding of the intent of the legislature when that statute was written and passed, that those rules are just to implement what that looks like day to day for citizens' lives in Idaho, like how that law will affect them in their day-to-day lives, and what that will look like. Unfortunately, we've found that that's not always the case. There's been, in several instances, rules that directly contradict the controlling statute. And even when you bring that to the attention of the executive department that wrote the rule, or when you bring it to the committee that would be the one to change it, they're very unmotivated in some cases to do anything about it. And it's frustrating in my mind that something that should be, pretty clear-cut legally, as far as if it contradicts the intent of the legislature when they wrote and passed that statute, it, in my mind, should invalidate it immediately, but that's not necessarily the case. I had a really good legal discussion about this with Brian Zollinger, Representative Zollinger, and his response was, you're right, but unless a majority of the committee agrees with you, it really doesn't matter. So unfortunately, there are rules out there that do not follow the controlling statute, and that's why one of the reasons why it's so important for the people of Idaho to keep their eyeballs on those administrative rules. And it's overwhelming. There's thousands and thousands of pages of them, and there's a lot to it. And so it's really important that for each issue, that you are making yourself an expert on, to go through rules and understand what's there and what should and shouldn't be there and what we can do to change it to make it more freedom oriented.
And they go through the rules the first part of legislative session. They go through the rules and sign in the rules, and we have done our best to educate during that time, but we haven't been able to stop a rule or change a rule through the rule process. I mean, one of them was the vaccine exemption form, and we're pointing out, hey, this rule is superseding the statute. It's more restrictive than the statute it was intended to be. And they did end up changing it because we put so much pressure on them, but it wasn't during the rule part of the session. The other one is the meningitis vaccine that says that it's for 12th grade students when we only have an exemption for child of school age. So now we've got a rule that's not in line with statute, and even though we brought that to their attention during the hearing, they didn't fix it. So it is a frustrating experience, the whole rule thing, because we've got all these crazy rules that are not necessarily in line with statute, and getting the legislators to do something about it is like pulling teeth. But for the department to do something about it.
Can I add something here to that? Just so the rulemaking process is a challenge because the rules are reviewed a third of the rules in each department are reviewed in rotation. But the problem that we have is even if you have a rule that you don't like or that you don't think fits or whatever, unlike a law that has to pass through the House and then pass through the Senate and then be signed by the governor, which the rules shouldn't be signed by the governor because they're basically his rules because bureaucratic agencies are his. In Idaho, if the House says no, but the Senate says yes, it remains a rule. And that really does need to change because the House should say yes and the Senate should say yes, just like if we were right, just like when the bill was written. And that's part of the problem that we have because we have seen the agencies end run. We had that happen in state affairs. I don't think it was this last session, but the session before. And I think Representative Crane, I can't remember if Heather was going to go to the meeting, but we had arranged after we found a rule that we didn't like in committee, we had arranged to go visit with them on the Senate side and the agency that the rule came from. And we really got the end run on that one. But you know, we tried, but where it doesn't take the House and the Senate, it only takes one body to approve those rules. It's a tough deal because they'll know what committee's sympathetic to their rules. They'll know who they can work, who they can get on their side, and the agencies, I think, put a lot of time and a lot of effort into making sure that they hold on to that power. So that's something that really needs to be fixed.
It really does. Thank you. How do we fight? Here's another question. How do we fire up people to challenge or run against them? I'm thinking must be against bad legislators. And I think the lit drops help with that. People getting out into those people's district and saying, hey, they've done this wrong and this is not constitutional and they're not listening to the people. And I have seen that work several times where somebody gets, you know, riled up enough and feels inspired that this has got to stop, and then they run. Do you have anything to add to that, Heather?
Well, you've got to look at their voting record, and you have to show a track record. I know when I first ran in my district, I used the Freedom Foundation's map, and there's a really good graphic. Graphics are huge, and I could just show. I said, you know, our area is growing government. All these other areas are, you know, growing freedom. How can we? You know, why are we doing this? Do people want more government in Twin Falls, or do people in Pocatello want more government? Because that's what you're voting for. And here's why. And you have to identify 3 or 4 really, really bad votes that your legislators have voted. And trust me, there's about 30 or 40. So you just got to get the biggest, worst ones. And I mean, basically, most of them have voted for the gas tax. Most of them have voted for Medicaid expansion. You can really hit some really good topics. You have to know your districts too. So you want to hit things that you know your district. You have to know the district. And so, but to get a good candidate, I mean, to get a candidate or to get a good candidate, you need not only someone that is that would make a good legislator, you need someone who is electable. And so it takes a little bit of both, and they've got to be able to be in both of those worlds, which is, you know, running a campaign, being out in public and speaking, plus they're going to have to go and make good votes. And so that's kind of what you look for. A lot of times it's activists that start following these legislators and go, oh my gosh, I could do better than this loser. And that's what motivates them to go, I could do this. I mean, that's what, when I start looking at their records, I'm like, I can vote better than that. That's what, you know, that's what it takes. So you have to, they're not going to vote for new people because you guys are so great and you care about freedom and you're, you know, a fresh voice or whatever. They're going to vote because they're mad because the other guy is screwing up. And that's why they're going to do it. So you have to let people know how bad the people are screwing up. And I tell you, you go look at the direction our state's going. We are no different than California and Washington. We're just a few years behind them. And we're not any better. And a lot of people have moved here right now hoping that we're different. And I'll tell you, if they don't get involved and push back, we're going to be right where their states they came from are in about 4 years. So, you know, there's a lot of retired people. I think we need to get more veterans. If we can find veterans that they know what it's like to fight for the country, and the country's about gone. So, I don't know, you just have to always be looking for them, always write their name and information down, and always encourage them would be my things.
And so if you find somebody that wants to run, or if you yourself wants to run, how does a person get started?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. So if you find me 10 people, we will get you a candidate school. And if you can get 10 people in your area, we will set you up to go through everything with them and help mentor them so they know, you know, what to do and how to run for office. A lot of us have made a lot of mistakes, or, you know, I started with Googling, how do you run for office? So you know, you can learn a lot from people that have been elected. And I think if you get a group of people, we're going to be more than happy to get some more Liberty folks in there. So we'll be happy to come do a class for you.
Awesome. Awesome. Does anybody know if there is a website or some way to find a list of the deep pocket lobbyists and companies? How do we find that information?
You go to IACI's website, Idaho Association of Commerce and Industry, and those are the money boys. Those are the ones that are basically behind our governor and pushing all this crap, and they're the big money in our state. And then there's always the pharmaceuticals, but the best place is the Secretary of State site. You can download Excel spreadsheets and by the amount of money they've given. And the maximum they can give is $1,000, but a group like IACI can give $1,000 from IACI, and then they can get all 100 of their companies that are in their group to give $1,000, and that's how it works.
That's an important thing to track, because during the primary this year, there were letters sent out from a really feel-good organization. It was either Sportsmen for Idaho or Idaho Sportsmen. And they campaigned, they sent letters out for 3 candidates in my district. I wasn't one of them, but they sent them out for 3 of them. And they sent them out for 1 candidate in 2 other primary elections. And somebody took the time to track that money back, and that money did track back to George Soros money. Came from the same place that gave money to one of the Democrat city council members in Boise. So, you know, that things like that are things that people that want to help, people that want to be engaged, you know, if you're good at spreadsheets and you're good at tracking stuff and accounting and stuff like that, it would never hurt to volunteer to track some of this stuff. There was a guy in northern Idaho that was doing it for a while, and he had a pretty cool website where you could go in and track all of this stuff. But it took financial resources to keep it going and stuff in between that and his job. He just couldn't keep it going. But it doesn't even have to be a website. But citizens that want to be involved and engaged, not everybody has to run for office to make a difference. Activism is important. Things like tracking where the money comes from and where it goes and where it ends up. There are so many different ways that people can be involved that really have a huge, huge impact in addition to running for office. Running for office isn't the end-all be-all to have an effect and an impact. It really isn't. So, just even things like that, someone to take the time to track, where does this money come from? How did it get into our state? And then, let's make it public. Our citizens deserve to know when that Soros money, because anybody can start a PAC and you can name it anything you want. I mean, Sportsmen of Idaho, how much more Idaho can you sound than that? But for that money to go directly back to Soros funding, and I'm sure that it happens a lot. IACI uses their realtor PAC, and who knows what else. So these are important things that citizens could do if they, to be engaged and help and make a huge, huge difference.
Oh, we're getting lots of thank you for your time, everyone, and thank you for the good information and the brilliant speakers. Of course, thank you so much for your time, ladies. We appreciate you very much. Good night, friends.